This is Mac OS Ken.
iPhone production delays delay planned iPhone production delays. Huh? iPhone is the only bright spot on the smartphone landscape, and analysts react to last week's Apple earnings. It is Monday, the 31st of October, 2022. I'm Ken Ray, and this is news from macOS Ken, brought to you by yours truly and sponsored by Rocket Money. Cancel unwanted subscriptions and save at rocketmoney.com/MOK. This show is also sponsored by SimpliSafe, the right way to protect your home. If you've thought about protecting your home with security but have been waiting for the right time, this is that time. Right now, macOS Ken listeners can get 40% off SimpliSafe's award-winning home security system. Not only was SimpliSafe named the best home security of 2022 by U.S. News and World Report, I use SimpliSafe to protect my home, because it protects my home. You decide what's needed to protect yours, getting just the pieces that are right for you, not some one-size-fits-all package. I like picking the pieces myself. I like setting it up myself. Took me well under an hour to do. And I like what's happening at the other end. When a threat is detected, SimpliSafe's monitoring pros contact you and send first responders to your home, even if you are away or unable to respond. All of that for less than half the cost of ADT's traditional, professional installed plans. If you have thought about protecting your home with security, now is the time. Don't miss this chance to save big when you protect your home with the best. Get 40% off your order when you visit simplisafe.com/macOSKen today. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes. SIMPLI. That's simplisafe.com/macOSKen. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. An apparent slowdown in iPhone production will delay a planned slowdown in iPhone production. That seems to be the word from TF International analyst Ming-Chi Kuo. You remember that small COVID outbreak we talked about last week at Foxconn's iPhone City plant in Zhengzhou, China? The one that started with Foxconn asking people to take their meals in their dorms and wear N95 masks when out of their dorms? The one that graduated to a Foxconn spokesperson saying that work in the facility was relatively stable, with health and safety measures for employees being maintained? Yeah, I'm starting to think this COVID-19 thing isn't going away and that relatively stable is a relative term. In a series of Twitter posts, Ming-Chi Kuo said that the plan had been to reduce iPhone production over November and December, but the COVID outbreak has put the Zhengzhou plant in closed-loop production mode. Virtuous as the closed loop might sound, it takes a toll on production, slows it down. According to one of the analysts' posts, more than 10% of global iPhone production capacity is currently affected as Foxconn's Zhengzhou iPhone plants suddenly entered closed-loop production without warning. So Foxconn had planned to slow production, but now they can't because production has slowed. Seeming to send a mixed message, in one single Twitter post, the analyst indicates that the current iPhone shipment forecast has not changed and that there should be limited impact to the fourth quarter 2022 iPhone shipments. The analyst also says that Apple is talking with Pegatron and Luxshare about moving some of their lines from producing units on the consumer end of the iPhone 14 line to cranking out Pro and Pro Max units. Possibly adding to iPhone production problems, workers who have had enough of lockdowns and are literally, apparently, jumping the fence. The BBC ran a report Sunday saying that some employees at Foxconn's Zhengzhou plant had been seen jumping fences and hoofing it home. Quoting the report, one 22-year-old worker told the Financial Times it was total chaos in the dormitories he and his colleagues were being kept in, We jumped a plastic fence and a metal fence to get out of the campus, he added. Workers also claimed the area surrounding the plant had been locked down for days, with COVID-positive workers being subjected to daily testing and quarantines to try to contain the outbreak. Perhaps trying to stave off more unrest and keep the iPhones flowing. The BBC piece indicates that Foxconn is working with authorities to give workers an easier time of it. In a statement Sunday, Foxconn said the government agreed to resume dine-in meals to improve the convenience and satisfaction of employees' lives. According to the report, Foxconn also said it was working with authorities on point-to-point transportation to get workers who want to go home, back home in an orderly way. Having a relatively stable day, That Apple is having trouble meeting demand on its Pro phones kind of reads as good news, considering the cliff over which smartphones have gone globally. Counterpoint research hit with numbers on Friday that marked last quarter as the lowest September quarter for smartphones since 2014. According to the firm, political and economic instability drove negative consumer sentiment, though the smartphone market saw two notable exceptions: Apple and Samsung, kind of. Apple is a definite, having grown shipments 2% year over year and pushing its market share to 16%. On the kind of side, Samsung shipments were actually down 8% year on year, though they did grow shipments 5% from the June quarter to the September quarter. Counterpoint lists lots of factors holding the smartphone market down. Those include the war in Ukraine, tensions between the U.S. and China, global currencies weakening against the dollar, inflation, and fear of recession. The firm thinks all of that may be strangling sales of low and mid-range smartphones. It's also probably got people holding on to the phones they already have, adding to a slow but sustained lengthening of smartphone replacement cycles. The one point of good news in any of it seems to be iPhone. Counterpoint Associate Director Jan Stryek thinks the first full quarter of iPhone 14 availability will add further quarterly improvement for the December quarter. It also sounds like he's looking for bargains from other phone makers as they focus on getting rid of excess inventory this quarter. Canalys has had a look at smartphone sales in China last quarter. In a word, weak. iPhone not included. According to the firm, third quarter shipments fell 11% for the September quarter versus the same quarter a year earlier. By the firm's reckoning, Vivo was down 23%, Oppo was down 27%, Honor was down 16%, Xiaomi was down 17%, and Apple shipments were up 36% last quarter. Even that was only mostly good news, though. Canalys analyst Amber Liu was quoted in the firm's press release saying, Apple saw remarkable growth in mainland China in the third quarter. Its annual launch is highly anticipated by consumers and channels, and strong demand for iPhone 14 Pro series contributed to Apple's overall performance. However, lackluster demand for the iPhone 14 series sent a strong signal that even Apple is not completely isolated from weak mainland China consumer demand. Under an onslaught of Android vendor competition, Apple had to concede to adopt aggressive promotions of its entry-level editions and previous generation devices, especially in the $700 to $800 US price band. No new Macs for the rest of the year. That is the latest pronouncement from Bloomberg's Mark Gurman. We talked here Friday about how that seemed to be what Apple execs were saying during last Thursday's fourth quarter fiscal year 2022 earnings call. The part where Apple CEO Tim Cook referred to the company's product lineup as set heading into the holiday season was one tell. Still a greater tell was Apple CFO Luca Maestri saying Mac sales for the current quarter are up against a particularly tough compare. For this quarter last year, he pointed out Apple had new Macs to offer. Though he did not say specifically that Apple will not have new Macs to offer this quarter, both he and CEO Cook seem to be indicating that, without saying it explicitly. Now a piece from Mac Rumors has Bloomberg's Mark Gurman saying in Sunday's Power On newsletter that Apple will hold off on new Macs until early next year. Quoting Gurman, "I'm told that Apple is aiming to introduce the upgraded models, including M2-based versions of the 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pros in the first quarter of calendar 2023. Yes, in case you're wondering, that is the same Mark Gurman who was saying as recently as August that we'd be getting new Macs from Apple in November. Seems to be more reason to believe him this time. More news in a moment, but first a word from a new sponsor to macOS Ken. It is Rocket Money. Do you know how much your subscriptions really cost? Most people think they spend about $80 a month on subscriptions. For many, it is closer to $200. You could be wasting hundreds of dollars each month on subscriptions you don't use anymore or maybe even forgot about. Rocket Money, formerly known as Truebill, could make that a thing of the past. The Rocket Money app shows you all of your subscriptions in one place. See some you don't recognize, don't use anymore, barely remember? Yeah, Rocket Money can take care of those too. To cancel a subscription, all you have to do is press cancel, and Rocket Money takes care of the rest. Get rid of useless subscriptions with Rocket Money now. Go to rocketmoney.com/MOK. Seriously, it could save you hundreds per year. That's rocketmoney.com/MOK. Cancel your unnecessary subscriptions right now at rocketmoney.com/MOK. A few price targets fell in the wake of Apple's September quarter earnings last week. Most of the lowered targets I saw didn't have associated notes, leaving one to assume that the reductions were indicative of current market realities, not anything specific to Apple. Big thanks to Philip Elmer DeWitt at Apple 3.0 for doing his usual reaction roundup. It is there that we see key bank analyst Brandon Nispel sticking with his overweight rating on Apple shares, though dropping his 12-month price target on the shares from $185 to $177. That same roundup had Citi analyst Gentleman Jim Suva keeping a buy rating on Apple, but dropping his price target from $185 to $175, and Deutsche Bank analyst Sidney Ho staying positive on Apple shares, while dropping his target from $175 to $170. One notable reduction came from Wedbush analyst Daniel Ives, and it did have a note with it. Quoting that, Apple delivered a mixed September quarter that featured top and bottom line beats despite foreign exchange headwinds in the quarter. In a horror show week for big tech earnings, Apple was the one bright spot as iPhone demand was relatively strong despite the macro with a heavy iPhone 14 Pro mix seen in the quarter. He still got an outperform rating on Apple shares, but, today is what today is. He lowered his price target on the shares from a street high $220 down to a still sky high $200. In a sort of tale of two earnings calls, pair of takes, BofA analyst Wamsi Mohan says Apple's December commentary was in line with expectations despite the quarter's extra week. That looks like trouble to him. At the same time, Morgan Stanley analyst Eric Woodring cited a solid September quarter and better-than-feared December commentary that was above consensus. Mohan has a neutral rating on Apple shares and a price target of $160. Woodring has an overweight rating on Apple shares and a price target of $177. Interesting to hear an Apple bull and the Bernstein bear ask the same question. Evercore analyst Amit Daryanani's note says eventually the question will be on durability of demand beyond the December quarter and the impact from macro, not just on iPhones, but also services. Bernstein research analyst Tony Sakanagi's note sailed in under a similar sentiment. No fireworks, but can Apple grow in fiscal year 23? That said, he is not the hater you might expect. Amid a sea of large-cap earnings debacle, said Sakanagi's note, Apple's fourth quarter results appear to be a relative victory. He's got a market perform rating on Apple shares and a price target of $170. Darianani has an outperform rating on Apple shares and a price target of $190. Most of the rest of the notes I glimpsed carried the same basic sentiment. Strong quarterly performance, especially considering #these times in which we live. There's live, then there's recorded live. Apple Music Live is once again opting for the latter. A piece from Apple Insider says the next Apple Music Live event will feature Megan Thee Stallion performing in Hollywood, an in-person live concert on the 11th of November, streaming on the 21st of December. If you live in the greater Los Angeles area, you can apparently try for tickets. The report says they are being offered for free via Ticketmaster. And finally today, the never-ending award season rolls on. The Mac Observer ran a piece last week announcing 5 Gotham Awards nominations for Apple TV+. According to Apple's press release on the nominations, the Gotham Awards honors visionary talent in front of and behind the camera, expands the audience for groundbreaking film and television, and supports the year-round work of the not-for-profit the Gotham Film and Media Institute. And the Apple nominees are fighting each other in a couple of categories. Both Pachinko and Severance were nominated for Breakthrough Series, long format, over 40 minutes, and both Min-Ha Kim from Pachinko and Britt Lauer from Severance were nominated for Outstanding Performance in a New Series. As for the 5th nomination, off on his own is Brian Tyree Henry. I mean, not on his own, but he's not competing against another Apple TV performer. He's nominated for Outstanding Supporting Performance for his part in the film Causeway. Apple TV Plus is not new to the Gotham Awards. 2 actors from last year's Coda picked up trophies in 2021. The film's lead, Amelia Jones, won Breakthrough Performer, while eventual Academy Award winner Troy Kotsur won for Outstanding Supporting Performance. The ceremony for this year's 32nd Annual Gotham Awards is set to take place on Monday, the 28th of November, in New York City. Today on the Mac Observer's Daily Observations podcast, COVID is playing havoc with iPhone production, and workers are getting tired of it. TMO Mangling editor Jeff Gutz joins me on this Halloween edition to talk about production bumps and reading iPhone availability in the months ahead. Plus, the guy who said new Macs next month now says new Macs next year instead. That is all today on the Daily Observations podcast from the Hack Observer, online at macobserver.com or wherever you get podcasts. macOS Ken, brought to you by me and sponsored by SimpliSafe. Get 40% off your order when you visit simplysafe.com/macOSKen today. This show is also sponsored by Rocket Money. Cancel unwanted subscriptions and save at rocketmoney.com/MOK. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media, online at backbeatmedia.com. You can reach me a couple of ways. Info at macosken.com or call 716-780-4080. Until next time, that is news from macOS Ken. I'm Ken Ray.
Ciao.